challenge for Donald Trump, because Nancy Pelosi has been to this rodeo before. She was speaker before and highly effective. She knows what she's doing. So that mano a mano between Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi will be one of the most fascinating storylines of 2019. I'm so excited to be there for the opening of it. It's going to be a roller coaster. Absolutely.
Well, we're glad that you're doing it. We'll be watching
Thank
it.
you.
Meanwhile, I wish you a very happy and restful Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Ari. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Now, as mentioned, I am Ari Melber in for Lawrence O'Donnell tonight. This is the last live show of 2018. And so perhaps it is fitting that a year which brought Donald Trump the largest midterm rebuke in a wave election in decades is now tonight a year that ends effectively with Trump aides beginning to cave to what we just discussed, the incoming Democratic Congress, which, of course, hasn't even technically taken power yet. Now, I'm about to show you what that caving may look like. Now, let me be clear. We are not reporting tonight that the shutdown is anywhere near over. It's not. We're not reporting a breakthrough. We're not suggesting even that these promises that may emanate from the Trump administration can be taken at their word on good faith. We all remember other immigration negotiations that have fallen apart when Trump or his aides simply dropped offers they made to, yes, Chuck and Nancy. But here is something new. It is Trump's acting chief of staff revealing they have begun backing off President Trump's demand of $5 billion for the wall.
We were at 5 on Saturday afternoon. We sat down with Mr. Schumer and gave him a number below 5. I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Below 5. Okay. Not going to tell you what it is. Could be 4.9. Could be 4. Could be lower. Well, again, when we talk about caving in real time, the leaks tonight suggest it was way lower, down to $2.5 billion, or half of Trump's original demand. Now, Democrats rejecting the offer because, as you know, they've been very clear about this whole thing. They're not going to fund the wall. That's not going to be their first order of business as they take power. And that now has Trump's chief of staff doing some wall rebranding.
Wait. Hold on. The American people wanted a wall. What is the president, what deal then now is President Trump willing to accept that is anything short of that wall?
Oh, no, we're still building the barrier. That's why the government is closed. Is the president is not willing to give up on the southern barrier. Keep in mind that steel slat fence that he sent the picture out, that is the ideal border barrier.
Now, even if this isn't going that well for the White House, there are leaks as well that Donald Trump takes some solace in the idea that as a matter of media, as a matter of sort of public discussion and narrative and all that stuff, that this could overshadow Nancy Pelosi's return to power next week. Here is the Daily Beast headline: Team Trump gleeful that shutdown will hijack incoming Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's big moment. Reporting increasingly, Trump and his allies see an upside in forcing Pelosi to have to spend the first days, if not weeks, of the next Congress engaged in an argument over border wall funding rather than her preferred agenda of ethics and election reforms and congressional oversight. Now, those are anonymous leaks, but here is a version of basically the same strategy on the record as the White House press secretary answers a question about federal workers and the shutdown.
What message does the White House have as these people struggle to make it through the holidays?
The real question here is Nancy Pelosi is only looking to protect her speakership and not protect our borders. And that's why she's unwilling to negotiate with us and unwilling to make any type of a deal.
Team Trump may be excited to use all this against Pelosi, but they also could be making a pretty classic mistake in politics as well as life. I'm talking about, of course, projection. Assuming that others see the world the way you do, or that others are bothered by exactly what bothers you. You probably see where I'm going with this, because while Trump's first priority may simply be attention, who's going to get press coverage next week, what is the news cycle day to day, Nancy Pelosi's proven she does have other priorities, and whether one agrees with them or not, they do involve policy. She has navigated her share of bad news cycles already, as well as several presidents, and is still poised to return to this third most powerful post in all of Washington. And as for the votes, consider this. When the president looked ready to sign a spending bill last week that did not include the wall, it was the Republicans in the House Freedom Caucus who were revolting. They encouraged the president to shut down the government, aided, of course, by a lot of right-wing media noise. And now, well, some of them are saying they want a shutdown until hell freezes over.
It sounded like McConnell and Ryan McCarthy were about to convince the president, you're on your own, you have no support. And that's when the Freedom Caucus took to the House floor and gave speech after speech about how important it was that we keep our promise and protect America with a wall. And the president saw.
How long should the president keep the government closed?
Well, it's only a part of 25%. And because we keep seeing people losing their lives without one, you
How
do
long?
it till hell freezes
January?
over.
February?
Till hell
Or
freezes over.
Hell freezes over will take longer than February, according to what we know. Gene Robinson is a Pulitzer Prize winning writer for The Washington Post. Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, and Jonathan Alter, columnist for the Daily Beast, all MSNBC analysts. Gene, you see the indications there, some movement on the numbers, while the hardcore caucus, if you want to call them that, saying until hell's literally frozen.
Right. And so, look, I think your analysis is correct that Nancy Pelosi will be Speaker, will come in with her own agenda and her own priorities and her own sense of what's important. And it won't be the same as Donald Trump's. And, why would she, at this point, take anything Mick Mulvaney says as holy writ, or indeed any deal that gets negotiated as holy writ, given Donald Trump's record of simply going back on deals that everybody else thinks are made deals. And so I don't quite know. I mean, to me, that is the huge stumbling point to anything. There's no incentive for Democrats to move, knowing that Trump is going to pull the rug out from under the whole thing at the last minute as soon as Ann Coulter, has indigestion.
Well, I'm confused, Gene, because when you put it like that, it makes it sound like he's not a good negotiator.
I think he ought to read this book called The Art of the Deal that was written by my college classmate, Tony Schwartz, and some guy named Trump got his name on it, too.
Yeah, well, the art of the branding, that part, there's something to that, the art of the PR. We're past PR, Yamiche, and as Joy Reid and I were just discussing, next week is different. I mean, we in the press are fairly accused sometimes of dramatizing the narrative. But next week will be something that has never happened before in the Trump era, which is the Democrats holding power. Here was one of them, Congressman Cicilline, explaining his view of it.
He wants a fight about this because he wants to distract from the other very bad things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. He lost his defense secretary in a very serious rebuke of his foreign policy. The Trump Foundation was closed because of persistent illegalities. He's lost the ISIS coordinator, Mr. McGurk. The stock market has been very volatile. The walls are closing in with the Mueller investigation. So I think the president has decided, you know what, a shutdown will distract from all of that.
Yamiche?
I think the president likes boogeymen, and in this case, a boogie woman, which is Nancy Pelosi. For years, Nancy Pelosi has been someone that the Republicans have held up, not Chuck Schumer, not Harry Reid, but Nancy Pelosi as someone that they said, okay, this is someone that we can raise money around and make her a boogeyman. What we have now is the president saying on the record in front of cameras, I will own the shutdown. I will not blame you for the shutdown. Chuck Schumer was laughing when the president said that in the Oval Office. And he said that because he knew that was a money quote that Democrats were going to be able to tweet, that they were going to be able to quote, they were going to be able to put in commercials. So no matter what the president says, we all know that the president wanted this shutdown and said that he was going to be proud to do this over border security. I would add to that list that Eugene Robinson just listed and you just listed about the issues that the president has. And the other thing that the president has is 2 dead children in federal custody. These are 2 immigrant children from Guatemala, an 8-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl, who we should be talking maybe a little bit more about, because these 2 children are really symbols of how America is failing at this immigration issue. The president's own commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol told CBS News, we need to do things differently. We need resources to go to mental health, to taking care of these children, to figuring out facilities where we can actually house children. So the problems are mounting, and I think the president hopes that through his PR spin, he can make the Democrats own this. But I think there are so many issues with this White House that he's in some ways overwhelmed by them.
Well, you mentioned those deaths in custody. We've covered that on this program. I know several of you have looked at that story. And on that point, Jonathan, take a listen to the defense of one congressional Republican on the issue.
But I think it's wrong to be piling on here and somehow blaming ICE. I mean, they've had hundreds of thousands of people that they've had custody of over the years, and I think these are the only 2 children that have died, certainly in recent memory. So considering all of that and considering what does happen in housing projects across the country, I think ICE has an excellent record, and I'd be very reluctant to be doing any piling on here right now.
I believe.
Or trying to make political points at this.
Jonathan?
It's not a good look for the Republicans, Ari. You know, it's callous. It's disregarding that there are real changes that need to be made in ICE. And we're going to see hearings on this. This is what people don't understand, is that elections really do have consequences. And the big consequence for the Republicans coming up is going to be a whole series of hearings on all of these issues that you and others at MSNBC and in other news organizations have been raising over the last 2 years. There are going to be hearings on all of them. Trump can try to distract attention with his games. He can try to say, well, we'll overwhelm Nancy Pelosi, on the day she's sworn in, so she might lose that news cycle. She doesn't care about that at all. She can walk and chew gum at the same time. She can bring forward a Democratic agenda and have these hearings in the various committees that the Democrats will now control that will unearth a whole series of abuses on the part of the Trump administration.
Yeah, and Yamiche, as you know, when we report out these types of stories, the first period of a shutdown does not have the widest consequences. A lot of what we end up doing is reporting on past shutdowns and projection. But when you get into weeks or even months, you start to remember all the different things the federal government's involved in. And yes, it is people who have less money, working class people, people living paycheck to paycheck, farmers, people in poorer rural areas, you name it, who are squeezed by this. I want to read from one such point for your analysis. USDA announcing that they'll be doing these direct payments to growers hardest hit by the trade war with China, and then the government was shut down. USDA saying in a statement that farmers were told checks will continue to go out during the first week of the shutdown, but direct payments for farmers who haven't certified production and farm loans and disaster assistance, all of that begins its hold in the second week and won't start up again until the government reopens. I want to report the fact, I'm not making light of it, but you button that up, Yamiche, with until hell freezes over. And there's a lot of farmers that are going to be hurt. And the question, I think, becomes, are they stuck as pawns in the president's political game?
Well, we're calling it a partial government shutdown because it's 25% of the government, but that's still hundreds of thousands of people that are not going to get paychecks come January 11th. And Mick Mulvaney and other people at the White House are indicating that this could go on for a long time. So what you have is people that could be having to take on second and third jobs to try to supplement the money and be federal workers at the same time. Add to that the fact that the president said most federal workers are Democrats and that most people impacted are Democrats. We know from the last 2 years of his presidency that he isn't a president that's tried to unite people. He's a president who's tried to stick to his base, try to stick to really turning out Republicans in elections and at campaign rallies. So if in the back of the president's mind, if he's thinking these are all Democrats, who cares that much? That's a big deal. And that means that in some ways might go on for longer because the president doesn't think a mother who's a Democrat who is looking for her paycheck is going to really be someone that he needs to worry about.
Right. And that brings you back, Gene, to a little bit of the core problem that so many people have talked about with negotiating, which is apart from whether Trump's good or bad at it, does anything hold water? I don't know if you ever saw that great film, Get Shorty. Remember that one? But there's a scene where Travolta is trying to negotiate with the folks, and both of them are running their mouths. And at one point he says, am I talking to you or am I talking to you? And he gets the answer so he can figure out who he can negotiate with. And I feel like Congressman Jerry Connolly, for your analysis I want to play you, had his Get Shorty moment where he's saying, look, we don't even know who to talk to. Take a look.
We don't know who we're dealing with.
Right.
Who is the negotiator on the executive branch of government that we can deal with? It's not the vice president. It's not the chief of staff. It's not the OMB director. And apparently it's not even Trump. He'll change his mind on a dime.
Gene?
Right, and so that's exactly the question. They can make a deal. It makes sense for everybody. Everybody, it's buttoned up. Everybody can claim a win. It makes political sense. Get the government started. Everybody's on board, and then Donald Trump will just say no on a whim because he's watching Fox News that morning. I mean, that's what is almost inevitably going to happen. You can see it. So what really will happen, I think the more likely course of events is that as this looks politically worse and worse for Trump, as he sees that he's sort of boxed himself into a corner here and there's no way out, he'll find some way to sort of get as far away from the issue as possible. Either by changing the subject or sort of tweeting that he's washing his hands of it or whatever, and then the adults will make a deal and government will open up again. And meanwhile, just one word of advice. Democrats don't write to me and ask for advice, but if they were asking for advice, I would tell them not to worry about Nancy Pelosi being made into a boogeyman or boogie woman, because guess what? Whoever is the Democratic speaker, for that matter, whoever is the Democratic candidate in 2020, Donald Trump is going to demonize. Right. That's what he's going to do. It could, no matter who it is, no matter what they do. So that's just a given. So Democrats, and I think they're going to do this, should just get on about their business.
Get on about the business. It's a fair point to fit in a break on. Gene Robinson, John Alter, and Michelle Cinder, thanks to each of you. Up next, Trump reportedly believes this shutdown could actually somehow interfere with congressional investigations. That's not exactly true. We have a Democratic lawmaker on a key investigative committee who may have a better view. Later, the remarkable story of one grieving mother's quiet resistance to what Donald Trump has been pushing. As we've been reporting, President Trump does seem perfectly at ease with keeping the government shut down. And now it seems this could be part of a larger strategic play, at least according to some leaks. The Daily Beast spoke with a source close to the White House who says, look, the more the focus is on the wall, the more Pelosi's forced to focus on this fight instead of the investigations. Now, is that even true? Well, let's get into it. Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen of Tennessee, who is on the Judiciary Committee, a key investigative committee, which will be busy with, of course, a new Attorney General nominee, along with a lot of other things. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Good to be with you, Ari.
Is it true, that claim there that I just read?
Absolutely not. The Judiciary Committee will be active, as will the Government Oversight Committee, in looking into the abuses of this administration, which have been unlooked into for the last 2 years when the Republicans were complicit and derelict of duty.
When you see, as we were covering in the earlier segment, the reports that Trump advisors think, well, maybe this will rain on Pelosi's parade next week. What is your response to that, and how do you think she, as your leader, should handle that?
He can't rain on the parade of a person who's becoming the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives for the second time. That hasn't happened very often in history. And a lady who was the first female speaker becoming the first female speaker to get the speakership back. It's an historic occasion, and she should be treated as the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of legislators. She's a phenomenal woman. She's a phenomenal speaker and legislator. She's smart, she's courageous, and she can run circles around Donald Trump, and she's liable to expose him in such ways that he will be shocked.
Strong
He's met his match.
Strong words, and I know she does have a lot of experience, and I know you're a close ally. On the stakes of the shutdown, when people say, oh, well, maybe it wasn't that bad in the holiday week, or we showed some of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle saying they'll keep going months till hell freezes over, quote unquote. What do you say to people who want to know, well, who does this affect, and how does this affect everyday people?
Well, it affects working people. It affects people who work for the government and who provide services for people in the Americans who need services. The courts are closed down in the United States. Attorneys have told litigants that their cases won't be heard and they'll be put off because they can't even work voluntarily. There will be hardships on Americans and hardships on American citizens, and Trump doesn't care. All he cares about is himself. He didn't care about his subcontractors when he ripped them off. He didn't care about people that he had in Trump University and ripped them off. He's Mr. Bad Example, as my buddy Warren Zevon would have called him. That's what he is. And he's doing that. He did it in private industry. He's doing it as president. He got away with 2 years without any oversight and without, when he had Nunez and Goodlatte running over there and doing his bidding and embarrassing the House of Representatives. Well, that's over. We got Nadler, we got Elijah Cummings, we got Adam Schiff, we got Nancy Pelosi, and we got Steve Cohen. And it's not going to be the same time, and he can say what he wants about him being tough, and he knows how to be tough. We know how to deal with bullies. We stand up to them.
You said Warren Zevon. Didn't he also do bring lawyers, guns, and money?
How was I to know she was with the Russians, too?
Wow.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
Some of these references, they become more apt as time goes on, but there's great wisdom in those lyrics. Before I let you go, Congressman, we talked about the investigations. You say the president's wrong to think the shutdown would get in the way. So what do you see as the priority for you on the Judiciary Committee and your colleagues when you take over next week?
Every indication is I will be the chair of the subcommittee that deals with the Constitution and civil rights and civil liberties. And we will have talked to Chairman Nadler, and I think one of our first hearings will be on the Emoluments Clause and the shredding of the Constitution and the congressional responsibility and duty to approve or not approve of foreign payments to the president. That's something that shouldn't be, and the Founding Fathers knew it. We'll get into that. We'll look at voting rights. And that's an important issue for us, and renewing the Voting Rights Act and having hearings to have a record. We'll look into the pardon power, I believe, and see how far that can go, and if there are examples of academicians who feel that the pardon power is not unlimited if it's used to obstruct justice or used for members of the president's family or for himself. So those are some of the areas, but I'm sure we'll be looking into a lot more, and I'm sure Richie Neal at Ways and Means will be looking into seeing his taxes and find out just how much he paid in taxes, or if he got a refund. We very easily could have lost money with Donald Trump. I mean, it might be beyond a refund. It may be the only time where somebody conned us out of more money than they were even due back.
All very fascinating stuff. Congressman, again, thanks for spending time with us tonight.
Good to be with you, Ari, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Now, coming up, the Trump White House has been lying so frequently that the Washington Post fact checker created a new category, a bottomless Pinocchio. Up next, we won't repeat the lies, but we will fact check them so you know the facts going into what could be a long shutdown. This shutdown has certainly raised the stakes of the immigration debate, and that has Donald Trump's administration lying about a lot of important issues. So let's go through a few. The biggest lie to have resurfaced is that famous or infamous campaign promise that all of this would be funded by Mexico. Trump now claims that the American taxpayer would just fund the wall up front through an appropriations process, i.e., paying for the wall, and then someday the U.S. would still get that money back through his new NAFTA deal. Now, first of all, hoping to get reimbursed later just isn't the same as paying for something. If your friend tells you he'll buy you dinner, then asks you to buy dinner, then claims he'll Venmo you next year, your friend didn't buy you dinner. It is that simple. Now, let's deal with this claim. If your friend says he won't Venmo you later for dinner, but he will rely on a multilateral treaty to reroute international funds and benefits to you in the coming years, potentially even after he leaves office, and based on the hope that other presidents would honor the same agreement, your friend definitely didn't buy you dinner. Now, that may be the easiest one. It's not the only lie. Donald Trump also claiming the border is now being overrun. And let's be clear, there is a legitimate broader debate about border security. It's had in this country and many other countries. But the facts for the United States show over the last decade, undocumented immigration into the U.S. has been declining. You see it right there. And the undocumented individuals who do come to the U.S. are mostly people who had a legal path to entry through visas and then overstayed inside the country. In other words, whatever you think about that, and you could try to reduce it, that's what policy is about, that type of immigration issue is not illegal border crossings from Mexico. And then there's the lie that White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders asserted today.
We pick up 10 known or suspected terrorists a day coming across our border, and we have to be able to stop this.
That is also not exactly true. The Military Times reporting it's a misrepresentation of a DHS report which found that there were about 2,500 encounters globally with people on a terror watch list. It means we're watching them, who were trying to travel to the U.S. Of those people, though, well, you can see where this goes. Most of them were trying to fly by air, so they weren't picked up, but rather turned away. And again, not only is that not the Mexico border, but those people, if you're interested in the facts, are not automatically terrorists either. Let's bring back Jonathan Alter and Gene Robinson. John, take it away.
Well, you know, you've just scratched the surface there, but you did a good job scratching it. There are so many lies, you can't keep track of them. I guess the biggest one that sort of encompasses the whole story is that there's some kind of crisis in American immigration, and there isn't. Yes, we need border security, but as you indicated, not only are the numbers down significantly over the last 10 years, but some demographers say that they're down more than at any time since the 1970s. There are fewer even then, and it is, as you said, mostly a problem of people overstaying their visas. So the question becomes, how do we restore some kind of sanity to this debate? And the answer is to reduce the level of fear. And I'm actually kind of optimistic about this because Trump has gone to the well so much, he's cried wolf so much, that I think a lot of people are kind of getting tired of it and realizing, and the numbers show this, that his fear-mongering is no longer working with them.
And Gene, as a student of American politics, there certainly are issues that are highly charged and political where the trend lines don't matter as much. Domestic terror attacks would be one example where they could be broadly decreasing, but their existence at all has a lot of Americans rightfully saying, we want to know what the preventive plan is at all times. Unacceptable. Immigration has not and never would be in that category. It would seem to be something where, and I'll put up some of the states because this is pretty interesting as you drill down to the border states, you have unauthorized immigration not rising in states like Arizona, New Mexico, and California. You have it effectively decreasing, and you see there it's only 3 states, one of which is Massachusetts, where it has actually increased. It would seem that those facts on an issue like this, when they get out there, should matter.
Right. And look, you just put it in a nutshell. Facts should matter, and that's really one of the potentially most damaging things about the Trump ascension and the Trump presidency. This whole thing has is his attempt to cheapen truth, to blur truth. There are facts. There is a number. There is a number for illegal immigrants. You can count it. And yes, visa overstays are the main problem. And guess what? Most of those people who are overstaying their visas are Canadians. They're not Guatemalans. They're not Hondurans. They're not Mexicans. They're Canadians. He's worried about the wrong border. I mean, but Trump lives in a fact-free world, a fact-free universe. But what's especially troubling is that there's this whole parallel universe that a lot of Americans live in and believe his lies, believe the world that he constructs, and sort of cutting through that fog is going to be one of the challenges of our times. I think it really is, because how can you have a democracy if you don't have a common chronicle of events and a common encyclopedia of facts? I don't know how you do it.
Preach. Well, this goes, Jonathan, to the larger political debate here, and I've covered these rallies, and I know both of you have. And one thing I did hear, and I always try to give credit to what I hear out there from Trump supporters, is, hey, we get it. We know some of what he says is overstated. We're in on it. And what the media, they argue, sometimes doesn't get is that they feel in on the overstatement, in on the exaggeration. But I wonder how that works, Jonathan, stacked against a binary claim like Mexico will pay for, which is different than some of the other stuff. Oh, I'm the best, I'm the best. And politicians before Trump and after Trump will have known to dramatize their own virtues. So take a look, though, at the famous claim when he announced, core to the announcement, Mexico would pay for it. Mark my words. Take a look.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
Jonathan?
So that's actually an opportunity for Democrats. And the reason why goes back to something that Karl Rove famously said. When you go after your opposition, go after their strengths, not their weaknesses. It's a little counterintuitive. Normally, politicians like to change the subject from their opponent's strengths and focus on their weaknesses. So the wall was Trump's strength. It can also be his undoing if Democrats drive this message that on his number one promise, he was not telling the truth and he failed. Because something that not a lot of people have recognized yet, the wall is dead. It is not going to be built. There will not be a wall across the southern border of the United States, not only because Mexico is not paying for it, but because the Democrats control the House of Representatives and they won't appropriate the money. And even if they gave him $5 billion, that's a rounding error. That's a tiny, tiny portion of that wall. So the basic dream that Trump had is dead. And once the American public realizes that and that he couldn't deliver on his biggest promise and that he was lying about it, that might hurt him politically.
Yeah, and that goes to, again, as I say, with all due respect to all voters who make up their own minds, if you're a Trump voter and you look at the priorities, a deficit spiking tax cut got done. That got done. But this wall, while they had Republican control, didn't get done. Right. The idea that now it's going to happen as Pelosi takes charge next week does seem rather fanciful. John Alter and Gene Robinson, thanks again for being part of multiple discussions tonight. Coming up, we turn to something quite important, a pretty remarkable story about how a mother has resisted attempts to politicize her daughter's death.
Molly Tibbetts, an incredible young woman, is now permanently separated from her family. A person came in from Mexico illegally and killed her. We need the wall. We need our immigration laws changed. We need our border laws changed. We need Republicans to do it because the Democrats aren't going to do it.
That was President Trump on the day an undocumented immigrant was indicted for a brutal murder of 20-year-old Molly Tibbetts. President Trump, as well as some other Republicans, invoked her death as a kind of political prop, arguing the administration's anti-immigration agenda would be basically validated by preventing this type of thing. Now, Molly Tibbetts' parents vehemently opposed how Trump and his allies were using the death of their daughter, arguing he was effectively campaigning on it. Here was an op-ed in the Des Moines Register. Now, this was 10 days after what was quite obviously a tragic death, according to the law, an indicted murder. And here was Molly's father, Ron Tibbetts. Quote, "Do not appropriate Molly's soul in advancing views she believed were profoundly racist. Molly was nobody's victim, nor is she a pawn in others' debate. The person who's accused of taking Molly's life is no more a reflection of the Hispanic community, as white supremacists are of all white people, and to suggest otherwise is a lie." Molly's mother, Laura Calderwood, also telling the Washington Post just this week that President Trump didn't ever actually contact her family to offer even condolences. And while the president was apparently using Molly's murder for a wider agenda against immigrants, Laura chose a different path. This is an important story given the stakes and the intensity, and here to tell us more about Laura's approach to the Trump immigration rhetoric is Washington Post reporter Terrence McCoy. These kind of stories are always difficult, and I've covered both sides of them, where families respond to a tragedy, a crime, a murder, in different ways. But what are you finding here from your reporting?
Well, what I found was a family that was trying to live every day and trying to understand the best way to go forward. And what helped Laura Calderwood, who's the mother of Molly Tibbetts, to find a way forward was actually to be able to reach out and take in the child of Mexican immigrants. And what had happened after all the news cameras left from Brooklyn, Iowa, was that many of the people who worked on this farm where the accused killer had worked fled. This became a place where was ground zero of one of the most polarizing debates in all of America. And what that meant was one family left behind their 17-year-old boy because he wanted to be able to finish high school. And the family that took him in was the family Molly Tibbetts.
And that's who you write about. His name is Ulysses?
Ulysses Felix, that's right.
Yeah, let me read a little bit from this report, just so folks, this sinks in. This is quite something. The nation, it seemed, you write, was directing its anger about Molly's death towards, as you mentioned, Uraby Farms, where her alleged killer had worked, deluging it with vitriolic messages. The immigrant families who worked there were fleeing. And you write, Laura thought of Molly. She would argue that the farm workers didn't deserve this, that they were only trying to earn a living. What would she say about Ulysses? Bring him in? Laura thought his father may be undocumented, worried about attracting unwanted attention. But again, what would Molly say? Laura arrived home weeks later now. The decision long since made, Ulysses living in the spare bedroom. Tell us about that.
Well, what happened was Ulysses is a 17-year-old kid, and he is good friends with Laura's son, Scott. And one day his family decided to pick up and leave because somebody had said something racist to his mother at a gas station. There were reports of students at the high school being harassed. And what happened then was his family said, we need to get out of here. So they left. And he wanted to stay. So the people that ended up taking him in were the family of Molly Tibbetts. And what you found in this moment were two people who their lives were upturned by this terrible moment of violence and then plunged into the center of one of the most polarizing debates in America, were then thrust together under this same roof, trying to figure out a way to live with one another.
So I got to ask you, and I know as a reporter you probably hew to a pretty objective approach to this, but the big question here on a night like this, what are we all supposed to take from this as Americans? What inspiration do we draw from the way these individuals have responded, as you put it, to this brutal killing by coming together?
Yeah, I thought a lot about that too. Like, what do you say about something like this, and how does this fit into the larger political debate? And what I think this is ultimately is two people who had almost a primal need in a way. This was a mother who needed a son, a mother who needed a child, and a child who needed a parent. And it shows how these two people from two different Americas, one that was native and one that was immigrant, were able to transcend these sort of racial or cultural divides, transcend a political divide, and come together under one roof in a way of a mother connecting with a child and a child connecting with a parent.
Yeah, it's something I think we could say, honestly, we salute them, and we appreciate you reporting out the story. Terrence McCoy, thank you.
Thank you.
And when we come back, a special word from Lawrence. That's next. The new year is almost here, and one of the best ways to kick off your celebration is, well, you know what we might say, donating to the Kind Fund, Kids in Need of Desks, which is the partnership that Lawrence created with MSNBC and UNICEF to provide desks to schools in Malawi that have never had desks, and scholarships for girls and young women to attend high school in Malawi, where public high school is not free and where the girls' graduation rate is much lower than the boys. Now, here is more from Lawrence O'Donnell about how the Kind Fund has impacted Malawi and given students opportunities that can only come sometimes once in a lifetime.
Well, the first beneficiaries of the Kind Fund are actually those workers at those factories who have jobs now making those desks, jobs that allow them to provide for their families. And the second beneficiaries are the kids who receive those desks. Over 1 million children in Malawi are sitting at desks in schools now where they never expected to have a desk. About a fourth of the money that you've contributed has gone to scholarships for over 5,000 girls to attend high school in Malawi, where, like many African countries, public high school is not free. It is especially difficult for girls to stay in school in Malawi. Families who can't afford to pay for one child to go to high school will usually pay for one of the boys in the family, not one of the girls. The girls' graduation rate is much lower than boys, and so girls need much more support to stay in high school. Leah Stevens is a 16-year-old senior in high school who is in school today thanks to your generosity. Last month, she told me that if she didn't have a Kind Fund scholarship, she would just be stuck at home. And when I asked her what she would do if she was stuck at home, she told me she would probably be forced to get married.
And what would you do at home?
Okay, I could just stay or even getting married. As of now here in Malawi, most of the girls who didn't go to school are now getting pregnancies or forcing to marriage.
Forced into marriage. There is so much at stake in being able to keep a girl in high school in Malawi. You can help at lastworddesks.msnbc.com. Any amount you can contribute is very helpful. Rose Makata is in her 3rd year of high school. She wants to be a lawyer. Here she is at home with her mother and her little sister. Rose's mother had to drop out of high school when her father died. Before Rose got a Kind Fund scholarship, she had to drop out of high school too, and she felt that her future would be doomed.
It was painful, and I started to feel like as if I'm being rejected, because it's like you cannot learn just because of money. You are not allowed to learn properly just because of money. And I started to feel like, why am I even in this world? Because there's no anything to do out here. No education. That means my future will be doomed.
When Rose graduates from high school, she will be the first one in her family to do that.
It felt like, no, I just have to stand up and be the first one to go far with my education, because I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be out there struggling for life. Without education, life is not good.
When I asked Rose how her mother feels about Rose's education, Rose had to fight back tears. And how does your mother feel now about you going to school?
Yeah, she's happy for me, because she keep on telling me, my daughter, work hard in classes, be strong enough, don't look back, just go on, look what you want to be. Yeah, that's it.
Your mother must be very proud that you're in school.
Yeah, she's very excited, very proud of me.
Because you now get to fulfill her dream. She wanted to go to school, but now you can't.
Yeah, I can go to school now. And she's always encouraging me that don't let go of this opportunity, because it comes once in a life. Yeah, that's it.
It comes once in a life. The scholarship that you provided for Rose has changed her life. With your continued support, we hope to continue to help provide that opportunity that comes once in a life.
Tonight's last word is brand new, because a few moments ago I just spoke with Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen of the pivotal House Judiciary Committee about the oversight that Donald Trump will face when the Democrats take power next week. Congressman Cohen offered an intriguing possibility about Trump's tax returns.
Ways and Means will be looking into seeing his taxes and find out just how much he paid in taxes, or if he got a refund. We very easily could have lost money with Donald Trump. I mean, might